The archivist's eyes, slitted, iridescent, and old beyond measurement, gleamed softly in the violet light of his terminal. His fingers, long and chitinous, danced across the interface. One more log, one more civilization, one more puzzle in the grand mosaic of the cosmos. But Earth-0437-E- refused to fit. The Romanians, he muttered aloud in galactic standard, the language of scholars and chroniclers. The sound echoed slightly against the crystalline walls of the Carpathian observation post, buried beneath stone and myth. Why did they switch sides? At that moment, with that leader? Against every projection? His voice carried no judgment, only curiosity, sharpened like a blade over centuries. In the next chamber, Assistant Observer WWII hovered near a holomap, blinking in rhythmic thought. Younger, softer, barely a century old, WWII lacked the archivist's seasoned detachment. He was watching the human war unfold with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I believe they changed because they believed they could, WWII said suddenly, turning. Not for power nor survival, not purely, but because they wanted to choose, to act, not react. The archivist paused. Dangerous nonsense, he said. Choice, when stripped of context, is indistinguishable from chaos. Outside, a soft tremor rolled through the ground. The humans above, moving artillery perhaps. The war raged in bursts now, concentrated near Bucharest. No one on Earth knew what slumbered beneath those hills. The Carpathian post had been established nearly 2 centuries prior, back when steam still ruled and electricity was a whisper of possibility. They had watched Romania grow, suffer, rebel, align with Germany out of fear and politics, and now teeter toward defection. The observers were under strict protocol. Do not interfere. Observe, record, classify. But protocols weakened under curiosity, and curiosity was an infection not easily contained. Pull up, subject 1432-Michael, the archivist said. King Michael I appeared in the air, a young man with wary eyes and the weight of a nation upon his shoulders. His face flickered between determination and youth, traits the archivist rarely saw coexist. It was 1944. The tide was turning against the axis. Germany's grip was slipping, but retreat would be ruin. Romania stood at a precipice. He should not have done it, the archivist said, voice almost reverent. Everything said he would remain passive. The models were wrong, WWII finished. Silence fell between them. Not the silence of agreement, but of something being born, an idea, or perhaps a fracture. The decision came swiftly, not from the archivist, but from WWII, who broke protocol. He disguised himself with a holomorphic veil, something primitive by galactic standards, but effective enough for human eyes. He chose the form of a lean foreigner with ambiguous European features, the kind who passed unnoticed in war-torn lands. He arrived in Bucharest in August, under the cover of thunderclouds and diplomatic confusion. His mission was not to alter, only to test a theory. If offered a sliver of non-human insight, truth shaped as prophecy, would a human like Michael act differently, or would he fulfill his course regardless? The meeting was arranged in secret, late at night in a wine cellar beneath a battered estate. The king arrived with 2 guards who scanned WWII's form with suspicion, but were too weary, too desperate to probe further. You claimed to know the end, Michael said, eyeing the foreigner with a young man's defiance barely masking exhaustion. Then tell me why we survive if we turn against Hitler. Because history isn't built by alliances, WWII replied, but by moments. And this moment is yours. Michael frowned, unsure whether to be insulted or inspired. Are you a prophet? No, WWII said. I'm a listener. I'm here because your voice may echo longer than you expect. He gave the king nothing. No weapons, no armies, no visions of the future. Only words, a nudge, a single conversation in a week of chaos. Days later, Michael launched the coup. Romania changed sides. The war shifted faster than even Allied generals predicted. Back in the observation post, the archivist watched the news filter in with something dangerously close to awe. "You interfered," he said. "I tested a hypothesis," Vakari countered. The archivist turned to the central database. Romania's shift had already rippled into galactic algorithms. Predictive models of Earth's future were collapsing, rebuilding, collapsing again. Earth was no longer a low-interest seed world. Now it was an anomaly. "I should report this," the archivist murmured, more to the databanks than to his protege. "And say what? That one man acted on a whisper? That humans chose change instead of inertia? They weren't supposed to choose at all?" Vakari stood in silence. Then, softly, he said, "They always choose. That's what makes them dangerous." The Carpathians rumbled again, distant artillery finding its mark. But in that moment, the sound seemed to signal more than battle. It was the cracking of a timeline, the splintering of certainty. The archivist looked once more at the projection of the young Romanian king, standing before a microphone announcing the turn. In his voice was fear, but also something else, resolve. Below the projection, the model updated. Event class reclassification, Romania, from predictable node to volatile catalyst. The archivist closed the terminal with a heavy hand. Vakari had not been punished, not yet, but the logs would record this deviation. In the dark, unseen by Earth's people and untouched by their weapons, something shifted. The Watchers had become part of the watched. Romania had changed sides, but Earth itself was changing chapters. And the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, had just felt the tremor. The tribunal of spheres convened in low orbit above the gas giant Laraxi 4, its crystalline rings humming with the presence of 1,000 minds. Across light years, a single event dominated discussion: Romania's pivot during Earth's Second World War. Not because of the territory it affected nor the casualties it redirected, but because it hadn't been predicted, and because it had been influenced. Ambassador Threx of the Barreline Accord stood suspended in his gravity cradle, translucent veins pulsing with indigo light. "Earth has exceeded its classification," he said, his voice both musical and laced with disdain. "Their behavior deviates from modeled development by 17.2 standard deviations. That is not evolution. That is tampering." The archivist stood below him in the chamber, both present and elsewhere, tethered through time-linked consciousness. His expression was unreadable, insectoid features betrayed little to the assembled delegates. He offered no defense, because one had already begun forming itself beyond his reach. On Earth, in the aftermath of King Michael's coup, Romania lay bruised, but not broken. The sudden realignment sent shockwaves not only through Europe, but through the covert observation systems embedded across the planet. Alien analysts updated profiles, scrambling to predict what new chaos might ripple from this breach in behavioral consensus. Vakari, now operating under silent exile from the Concord, watched from a rented flat in Brasov. He no longer wore a holomorphic veil. He had chosen to keep his form entirely human, borrowing a body from abandoned tech long buried in archives. Flesh felt strange, but the constraints grounded him. His interference had worked, and that success terrified him. He wasn't alone. Others had noticed the shift. The Zharn, notorious for leveraging emerging civilizations as proxy agents, began discrete scans of Earth's neural bandwidth. The Sellians opened probability markets on when Earth would breach fusion thresholds. What had once been a forgotten blue speck was now a contested variable. But it was the Lyroth that made the first move. A Lyrothi observer drone landed in Constanza under the cover of an Allied naval arrival. Unlike Vakari, they brought gifts. Micro-lattice materials, psychic filtration protocols, crude fusion cores disguised as advanced generators. In the eyes of local engineers, it was simply salvaged Nazi tech. But it was not. And the Learoth had no intention of observing. They intended to cultivate. Vicari intercepted the transmission 2 days too late. He met the contact under a leaking tram shelter. The human's eyes were wide, pupils fluttering from residual exposure to Learothi neural encoding. She was young, Romanian resistance, maybe 20. Her name was Daciana. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but excitement. "They showed me the inside of a mountain," she whispered. "Not a cave, a machine made of thought, and something else. A question so large it made my bones hurt." "You touched Learothi code," Vicari said, his voice taut. "I didn't just touch it," she said. "I understood it, and it scared them." Vicari stared. That wasn't possible. No unenhanced species could parse Learothi constructs. The alien minds depended on complexity as camouflage. Understanding was supposed to be fatal. "I think," she said slowly, "they left too quickly. They didn't expect us to listen, just to obey." That single sentence chilled Vicari more than any threat. The Learoth had expected submission. What they received was comprehension. Partial, imperfect, but real. That meant Earth wasn't just volatile. It was adaptable at a speed previously unseen. Back aboard the tribunal, the archivist accessed Earth's data logs and ran a new simulation. Earth had absorbed the Learothi artifact. The exposure had not damaged its population. Instead, patterns emerged. Romanian engineers began implementing design features they believed were their own. The resistance reorganized with uncanny efficiency. A philosophical text appeared, part memoir, part codebook, that described time as a river with multiple mouths. And in every version of the simulation, Earth became a wild card, a civilization that refused deterministic containment. The archivist didn't speak. He simply updated the status. Humanity, strategic anomaly. Projected influence level, escalating. In Brasov, Vicari watched Daciana sketch circuitry into a notebook stolen from a schoolteacher. The shapes were fractal, almost elegant. She had no training. She only remembered. "You said you're a listener," she said suddenly, not looking up. "What are you hearing now?" Vicari didn't answer right away. He was hearing many things: panic from factions across the Concord, threats of embargoes, whispers of quarantine protocols. But most of all, he was hearing the same thing in every signal: fear. He finally said, "That the galaxy underestimated you." "No," she said, "they underestimated us all." In that moment, Vicari realized something fundamental had changed. The central conflict was no longer between human nations, nor even between humans and alien overseers. It was between the presumption of control and the reality of autonomy. Earth, with Romania as its earliest pivot, had demonstrated the one thing no predictive system could manage: self-determined evolution. He opened a communicator embedded deep in his synthetic wrist, patched to an illegal relay hidden beneath the old ruins of Sarmazigatusa. "Prepare fallback protocols," he told the empty line. "The humans are accelerating." The voice that returned was low, amused, and unmistakably Learothi. "You don't understand them either, Vicari, but you will. They're building myths again, and some of those become weapons." Vicari ended the call without reply. In the distance, sirens flared. Another front, another brief, brutal clash in a human war. But beneath it all, something deeper churned. A second war, quieter, stranger, more profound. And it was only beginning. The year was 2144, and Earth was no longer a footnote in galactic archives. Above a quiet sunrise in Bucharest, a Leviathan vessel drifted, casting its sleek, silver shadow across the marble streets of the new diplomatic quarter. It bore no flag, only the sigil of the Earth Confederacy, twin spirals crossing in the shape of a Mobius loop, human and alien lines fused into one. At the city center, beneath a statue of King Michael I, Ambassador Daciana stood with her eyes fixed skyward. Her hair, silver-threaded and bound tight, glinted in the soft light. She had not aged in the way most did. Neural harmonics and adaptive retroviral therapy saw to that. But there was something in her gaze that was old, older than the Confederacy itself. She had once been a girl in a war. Now she spoke for an entire species. Inside the orbital tribunal station, the archivist prepared his final testimony. The chamber was smaller than in centuries past. Many of the old species had withdrawn from open diplomacy, unwilling to share a table with the unpredictable, newly ascendant Earth. But the few who remained did so with a wary respect. The humans had not conquered. They had not spread like weeds. Instead, they had done something worse. They had asked questions, and they had remembered the answers. The trial was ceremonial. Earth stood accused of retroactive violation of the Concord's prime observation statutes, laws built to prevent developing civilizations from being contaminated by advanced intervention. But the case was hollow, the evidence unclear, the outcome predetermined. Daciana entered the chamber flanked by representatives from Romania, Japan, Brazil, and the former African coalition. Each one a historian by training, a diplomat by circumstance. She walked alone to the dais. "You claim we broke laws we did not know existed," she said without preamble. "You claim we absorbed knowledge we were never given. And perhaps you are right." The Larothi speaker hissed softly, prepared to interject, but the archivist raised a clawed hand. Silence returned. Daciana continued. "But we did not learn because you taught us. We learned because you watched us, and we understood what your silence meant." Her voice did not rise. It didn't need to. "We saw your drones in our mountains. We heard your thoughts leak through encoded language. We read fragments of your truths and chose what to keep. You did not uplift us. We adapted to you. That is the difference." The chamber shifted. An atmospheric processor hissed quietly. Even the Liroth fell still. "I do not deny we changed after contact," she said. "But not in the way you fear. We became more human, not less. Romania's choice in that old war was never a glitch in your models. It was the first proof that our species would never stay on script." The archivist leaned back. His mind, partitioned in thousands of directions, paused its analyses. In that moment, he allowed himself to listen. "Romania didn't switch sides because of a whisper in a cellar," Daciana said. "It did so because a boy king chose to believe he still had agency. You thought chaos defined us, but it's not chaos, it's courage." Outside the station, the Dacia Protocol Fleet prepared for its inaugural voyage, peacekeepers trained in non-linear diplomacy, cultural memory, and adaptive conflict mediation. Their flagship bore a name that no alien could pronounce, but every Romanian could. Schimbare, meaning change. On the vessel's bridge, Vicari stood silently. No longer exiled, no longer hidden. He had taken the form closest to his human frame, aging it slightly, allowing for laugh lines and crow's feet. He watched Earth rotate slowly beneath them and wondered if the Concorde had ever truly understood what they'd awakened. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime, a message from the archivist. Observation complete. Earth transitioned. Final status. Peer civilization. Recommendation. Treaty. Not containment. Vicari allowed himself a breath he didn't need. In the tribunal, the archivist's voice rang out, calm and final. "There was no violation," he said. "No manipulation. Only influence. Influence, after all, is inevitable." The case was closed with no further ceremony. When Daciana stepped back into Bucharest's evening air, children played near the king's statue. Tourists took pictures beside the bronze alien monolith that had been erected in recognition of first contact, not the one that came later, clean and procedural, but the real first contact, the unsanctioned one, the conversation that changed a nation's path. A journalist asked her, "Why Romania? Why was it the first to pivot, to spark all this?" She smiled. "Because we remembered what others forgot, that the smallest act of will can break a pattern." Was it luck? No, she said, walking away. It was choice. And above, far beyond the clouds, the stars rearranged themselves into new possibilities.